Hi everyone, how are you? Welcome to today's show, A Moment with God. And I pray that you're doing well. If you're listening to the podcast, it's KN George Podcast on Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, and wherever podcasts are available. Thank you. Today is a wonderful time in the presence of God, and I pray that you're doing well. So I want us to talk about heaven. Heaven. When was the last time you actually heard someone talk about heaven other than in a funeral? When was the first time you heard a preacher dedicate an entire sermon to heaven? So, what I've come to notice is that many people don't really understand what heaven is all about or what will be happening in heaven. In fact, a lot of people think that we will be singing forever and ever and ever and ever in heaven. And they actually think that we will not be doing anything else other than singing and praising and worshiping God. And what I want to say to you is that will be happening, but it will not be the only thing that will be happening. Okay, so let's first of all have a clear idea or a clear understanding of what heaven is all about. So these are my thoughts, and I want to share my thoughts today as well as what the Bible says about heaven. So what we'll do, I will share my thoughts and then I will have scriptures that back up some of the thoughts that I have, but we'll also get the Bible's view on what heaven is all about. Okay. Now, one of the things that I think has a problem, or we have a problem as a people in the church, is that when we talk about heaven, people usually think that we are dying, that we are going to heaven. Going to heaven means that we have to die. And the truth of the matter is, if you want to go to heaven, you have to die. But unfortunately, for many of us Christians, we are not ready to die. We are actually afraid of death. While in opposite, the exact opposite should be happening. We should not be afraid of death because we know that death is taking us to heaven to be with our God. But again, we don't want to die before our time, and no one wants to die before you actually fulfill what God has created you to fulfill. Because if you die and you go to heaven without fulfilling what God has told you or has called you to fulfill, heaven will not be a very nice place for you. Okay, so we need to understand that first, that before we go to heaven, we've got to fulfill something. We've got to fulfill a purpose here on earth. But again, on the other hand, we should not be afraid of heaven. There's this book I was reading, a very inspiring book, and I would like to encourage you to study and maybe get this book and read it. It's called Killing Christians. And it's about this guy who writes different stories about Christians in war zone areas and where Christianity is being persecuted. And one of the things is that these guys or these people are getting killed for being Christians. They're not getting killed for breaking the law or doing crazy things or being criminals. They're getting killed for simply being Christians. And so these stories, I won't mention the countries that are mentioned in the book. You can go read it. But these are countries that predominantly have a particular religion that is predominant. And becoming a Christian, definitely means that you're going to die. If you stand and say, I want to be a Christian or I am a Christian, it means that you have signed your death certificate. In places like Kenya, we have not yet experienced that. Maybe some places, some parts where we have the Al-Shabaab, some people have been killed in the past in Kenya for simply being Christians. But in the larger community, in the larger region of Kenya, we are not experiencing such things. Same thing with other African countries who believe really in Jesus Christ. Nigeria has had its experiences with that, where you simply get killed because you're a Christian. And so in my country of Kenya, we are not very conversant with persecution. And so our Christianity is not very powerful or very strong. Okay. Though we have this huge desire to serve God, going to wonderful crusades and having experiences with God, I cannot say that as Kenya we have been tested in terms of our faith or in terms of standing for our faith. We have not been tested through persecution and through fire. Now, in a few years to come in Kenya, there will be persecution, as I've said in previous videos. But in those years, the grace of God will be increased upon the Christians to be able to fight this persecution. So I'm talking about maybe a decade or 2 decades to come, approximately 30 years to come. We're going to experience some form of persecution as Kenyans. And so we have to be very careful, and we have to begin to think about heaven. So when we talk about countries like South Africa or Zimbabwe, where there is relatively good, a good number of the population are Christians, we are talking about the same scenario. When we talk about Zambia, Uganda, we have a lot of Christians. When we talk about Nigeria, but most of the times, these people, we as Christians, we don't really think about heaven. And when we think about heaven, we think about it in terms of, like going to heaven, going to sing, going to stand before God and clap our hands forever. We'll be bowing down with the angels and just lifting Jesus up and worshiping. And that's great. And that part will happen. That will be one of the key things that will happen in heaven. Because when you look at the Bible, there's a lot of worship and a lot of songs and a lot of praise. And so that will be a key happening in heaven. But what I want to submit to you is that it will not just be that won't be the only thing that will be happening in heaven. There'll be many other things that will be happening in heaven. And those are some of the things that I want us to look at. But before we even get to those things that will be happening in heaven, the first thing that I want us to understand is, what is heaven? How does it look like? And even as I say this, there are many people who have been given the privilege to go to heaven, either in dreams or in vision, or in what has been known now to be near-death experiences. There are those people that God has honored greatly to get to heaven. So one time I had an experience in my own life, and I was at a church, and we were worshiping and praising and worshiping and praying, and then I just had this experience. It was like an earthquake, and before I knew it, I was falling down, and I couldn't stand on my 2 feet. And then I saw myself in this place where there was this golden path, pure gold, like it was headed towards a city. And for me, that was a brilliant experience because I was very young that time. I was still a teenager. I didn't understand a lot of things about heaven and spirituality and God and all this stuff. But I got that experience. And so I started walking towards, following this golden road or golden path. And I walked towards it, along it. And I saw a big city at the end of this path. And I decided to just walk into this city. And I walked in, and I got to the gate. And there was these two huge angels, such that they looked like mountains. They were so tall and so big that I couldn't see their faces, but I could see the image of, their image and their bodies, and they were so tall. And when I got there, they opened up the gates, and I walked in, and it was the most beautiful experience I had ever had, or I have ever had since. It was an amazing time for me. Amazing. Like, this was just, when I say these things, it's not just about happenings, but this happened to me. And it was a serious, amazing experience. And I walked into it, and I was led by someone whom I do not know. I don't know whether it was an angel or it was Jesus. I do not know. And I walked into this place, and he led me to these rooms. It was a golden place, totally gold and pure, very wonderful. And he got me into a room that looked like a library. There were so many books. It was the largest library I've ever seen in my life. Since that time to this day, huge library. It was almost like a stadium full of books and books upon books. and I saw photos of African presidents, both in the past and in the future, those to come. And I was young. And the funny thing is that most of those presidents that God revealed to me have, some of them have come to power, others are yet to come. And it was such an amazing, amazing experience. And I was taken to this portion of books, and I saw a lot of books that were written. Some had names of people, others had faces of people, and there was all these things. And there was a book that I saw, but I won't get into those details of the book that I saw. And then after that, I was taken to another room that was now, it wasn't a room. I walked in, there was this door that was opened, and I got into this space that looked like maybe 4 or 5 soccer stadiums put together into one. And there was a huge presence of a lot of angels, thousands of them. And there was a huge something that looked like an altar at the front, something that was raised, and there was someone who was sitting there. And all the angels were bowing and worshiping and bowing and worshiping. And suddenly the guy who had led me there disappeared. I couldn't find him. And so I got confused. I didn't know what to do. And so I started bowing with the angels, just doing what they were doing. And if they lifted up their hands up, I would lift my hands up. So I just followed that. So when I returned back to earth, because I had my mom call me and I came back to earth, it was a very interesting experience because I came and I was speaking in tongues. And the moment I came back, I saw people surrounding me. There was like a crowd of people who were surrounding me, watching me. And I started prophesying to these people in tongues. And so I would look at someone and I would just speak in tongues. And I couldn't speak in English, though I knew what the prophecy was supposed to be. I was speaking in tongues, and I would understand what I'm saying, but for some reason, if I tried to speak in English, it wouldn't come out in English. So I just spoke in tongues, and spoke in tongues to different people, and I was so drunk. I felt like a drunk person. Now, one thing you have to understand, I've never taken alcohol in my life. So I don't know how being drunk feels like, but that day I felt drunk. And I had my family members, carry me because by the time I came back, I wasn't at the altar or at the stage in the church. I was out in the field, and it was at night, and I had walked. And so I was told that I was walking and I was dancing and walking and dancing and walking and just doing some funny moves and some funny dances. Then I was told I got to the field and I started bowing and rising and bowing and rising, So whatever was happening in heaven was also happening on earth, because I was not in heaven. I was on earth, but I was getting an experience of heaven. And so there are many people, I don't want to go on with that story, but there are many people who have experienced heaven, and there are people who have dreamed with heaven. There are others who have actually been taken up to heaven. There are people I know who got into accidents and they died for moments, and they were in heaven and they came back. And before they got buried or before they were taken to the mortuary, they woke up and they were back. And every one of these people came back with a message. I came back with a message, and I'm living that message because it's what God asked me that time to do. And that's what I'm doing now. And so heaven is real. That's the first thing that we have to set. Heaven is real. So when you talk about heaven and people are doubting, is there a heaven? Heaven is real. Now, there are different heavens according to what people say, because the Muslims have their heaven. I believe the Hindus have their heaven. The Buddhists have the enlightenment. Christians, we have heaven. And I believe in the heaven of the Bible. The heaven that the Bible talks about is more clearly defined than any other religion. If you study the Quran and you study all these other books, they're all brilliant books. But the heaven of the Bible is more clarified, more explained, and there are actual activities that are going to happen in heaven that will not be happening in these other teachings. So let me focus on what I believe in, okay? And as I share with you. So the first question that I have to ask you is, have you ever had an experience about heaven? Have you ever visited heaven? Do you know someone who has had an experience where they visited heaven? And if you do, just talk to us and share with us. Or if you have had an experience with heaven, just say, yes, I've had an experience. Just explain a little bit on the comments so that our faith can be built up that heaven is real. Now, if heaven is real, hell is also real. And these are things that we have to agree on and just know that this is what the Bible teaches. The Bible teaches about heaven, and the Bible also teaches about hell. But there are a lot of stuff that people don't understand about heaven. For example, do you know that the current heaven as constituted is not where we will spend eternity? Okay, the current heaven. You see, the heaven we have now today in this world, that heaven will be destroyed together with the earth, and God will create what is known in Revelation 21 as the new heaven and the new earth. So the heaven we have now is like a station. It's like a place where people go and wait for the new heavens and the new earth. Okay, very interesting. Now let's go back to Genesis. At the time of creation, God creates the new heavens. Sorry, not the new heavens. He creates the heavens. He creates the earth. He creates the bodies, the stars, the moon. He creates the earth and human beings. Okay, brilliant. When God does that, He creates this earth that we are in a state of perfection. Everything is perfect. In fact, Adam is perfect. No sin, nothing. He's brilliant, perfect. Even his mind is perfect. Because this guy, for him to name all the animals, they are crossing before him and he's naming them and he's just calling them names: lion, cheetah, tiger. Just came to him direct. He was operating at 100% capacity of his brain when he was in heaven. And this is a funny thing. Right now, scientists, I don't know whether it's scientists or biology, but those guys who study the brain, they say that Albert Einstein, the inventor, was operating at 15% capacity of his brain. And they say that the average person operates at between 5 to 10% capacity of the brain. And I saw that and I was like, no, we are created to be better. We are created more than that. But then the truth is, many of us, our brain capacity is approximately 10%. That is now the billionaire at 10%, operating at 10%. But then so you wonder, how about the rest of us who never really take time to think about issues, never really think beyond what we have been taught? Okay. At what capacity? Is it like 5%? Is it like 2%, 1%? I don't know. But it's between 0 and 10%. That's how we operate. And I have reason to believe that before the fall of man, Adam and Eve were probably operating at 100% capacity of their brain. The reason I believe that is because they were having these conversations with God. For example, the Bible says that Adam was having a walk with God every day. It's not a walk like how you know it. This was a literal walk. God came to Eden every evening to take a walk in the cool of the day with Adam, and they just talk and talk and talk. I believe that he was operating at 100% capacity because of that time he was allowed to see God. God had given him that opportunity. He was having conversations with God. If you read the book of Ezekiel, and you read the book of Daniel, and you read the book of Revelation, and you see how God is defined, or how the image of God, it's not someone you want to stay with every day. He's surrounded by these scary things, something that has the head of an eagle, the head of an ox, the head of a cow, and the head of a human being. All these things, these four things surround him and carry him. They are called the cherubim. Okay? The cherubim is, they are the carriers of God. And imagine God appearing to you. Imagine these four faces appearing to you and saying, oh, I want to have fun with you. My friend, you will run for your life. But Adam was at that capacity, okay, until the fall. So I believe heaven was created to be perfect, the current heaven. I believe the current earth was created to be perfect. But then sin comes into the world and everything falls as it is supposed to because sin has come. And so everything collapses, man. Everything, including the universe, the stars, the heavens that we know, everything collapses. Now, I also believe something else, that when God created this earth, he created it as an extension of heaven. So he created the heavens. Genesis 1:1, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was sorry, in the beginning, God created the heavens. I've confused, I've quoted John 1, but let's go back to Genesis 1:1. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth was formless and void. So the earth was there, but it had no form and it was empty. It was there. That's what scientists say, that they have discovered things 80 million years old, which is okay because the earth was there. We don't know how old it was. But from creation, it's approximately 6,000 years old. But now, that's besides the point. The point is this, that God creates this earth and creates the heavens. And I believe that he creates this earth that we live in as an extension. And not just the earth, but the universe on this side of the world. Okay? Now, let's go slowly. On this side of mankind, let's use that. This side of mankind, we have the universe. We have the stars, the planets, all these rocks. They say they are coming to hit Earth, but they never reach. All these things they have. Beautiful things. The stars, the galaxies, beautiful universe. They actually say it will take like 100 million light years to cover the universe. Meaning, this is what it means. If you're traveling at the speed of light, going to the universe, it will take you 100 million years to actually cover the entire universe. That's how vast, that's how big the universe is. I believe that God did not make a mistake creating that universe. But I also believe that originally God created this universe on our side to be perfect. The galaxies were perfect. Saturn and Pluto were perfect. Jupiter was perfect. Earth was perfect. The sun was perfect. The moon, all these things were perfect. I mean, the sun wasn't overheating that time. It was regulated. And so so man eats this fruit and everything crashes. Not just everything, but even in the universe. I believe that the sun became more heated at that time. I believe that at the fall, stars started dying. I don't think they were created to die, but stars started dying. I believe that Jupiter got on fire. Is it Jupiter or Saturn? One of those two. They got on fire. They are constantly on fire. I believe that the moon developed craters after man ate that fruit. I don't think they had these things before because they were created in perfection. I believe that it was possible that time to travel to Jupiter anyway, but sin comes to the world and everything falls and collapses. And so now we talk about this universe. So this is what I believe about heaven. Many times we talk about heaven and we say, oh, this is a city, the great city of God. Amazing. It's a great city. But I don't think heaven is a city. I think heaven is a planet. I think heaven is a universe. Because the question I have is, why would God create a universe on this side of mankind and not create a universe on his side? I mean, like, it just makes sense to duplicate it. If he was creating this earth as an extension of what he already had, why then does it make sense to have heaven as a planet? Maybe the heaven we know is one of the planets, or maybe there's a whole universe on that other side. And again, if it's a city, if it's the only city, heaven is a city, then how, like, the population of the world right now is 7.5 billion. We are actually approaching 8 billion very soon. 8 billion people were alive, not counting the dead. Now, out of those 8 billion people, over 5 billion are Christians or confess to be Christians. Okay? When you talk about the Catholics and all these denominations, let's give them like 4 billion, half the world population, not counting the Chinese and the Indians, because then you put the Chinese and the Indians, the half of the world is gone, because there are billions of them. And so they are Christians. And all these guys will probably, if they believe in Jesus Christ, they'll probably get to heaven. Are you saying that there's a city that God will build, a city that big? I believe so. He is able to do it. But I think in better terms, I think he will create, or he has already created, a planet. In fact, that's why he says that in Revelation 21, he will create a new heaven, the new heavens and the new earth. The new heavens and the new earth. Meaning, he will create all these things that we see, but better, in a more better place, perfect place, all these things. He's going to do that. But currently, I believe that there's a planet called heaven. And I believe that there's a universe on that side of heaven. There's a whole universe. I believe there are stars on that side. I believe there are planets on that side. I believe there's everything that we have on this side. But the only difference is that on that side, there's no sin. And on this side, there's sin. I believe that the plants in heaven, in that planet called heaven, are perfect. They are in their perfect nature. In other words, they are in perfect glory. They have the glory of God. Because one of the key things that we lost as human beings when Adam ate that fruit was the glory of God. You look around you and you realize that the grass that you see is not in its full glory because it's in a fallen state. So it's not in a perfect state as it was intended to be originally. And these are facts. You look at the rivers of the world. For example, recently I was watching the rivers of the world, the best rivers in the world, and I tell you, it's wonderful. And you can watch that documentary. It's like a documentary about the rivers of the world. Beautiful. The Nile, the Amazon, you understand all these rivers, how they came to be, the cleanest, the dirtiest, saltwater rivers, and all these things. Beautiful, where they feed the oceans, they come from, their sources, how they sustain entire nations and communities. It was a wonderful, documentary, and you can watch it. And I believe that those rivers, in all their glory today, they are still in a fallen state. In heaven, they are perfect. If Adam didn't fall, those rivers would still be perfect in everything they do. Heaven. So you better ask yourself, have you had an experience about heaven? So this is the first part of this series. And I'm going to take you through the next series. Thank you for watching. God bless you.